What's good? What's good? What's good, fam? Welcome back to the zone. And for those of you that are new to the channel, thank you for clicking on this video. And so to recap, last video, we walked through the Milwaukee Bucks because I thought it would make sense to take a deeper dive into some of the teams so you can get familiar with a lot of the players that are in the FBL. So that when we get to the point where we're talking about the award races or we're looking at the league leaders and when we talk about the playoffs in general, you have an idea of who the key players are and why the teams are the way they are. And as part of that discussion in the last video, I had to admit that I was having a hard time finding good games to highlight, mainly because a lot of the games that I had recorded up until that point, there were a lot of blowouts, unfortunately. However, when I looked at the schedule, I did see the Houston Rockets go up against the Philadelphia 76ers, and I thought, this might be very interesting to watch. And I say this because for those of you that may have missed it, and I suggest you take a look at it, when we took a look at the 76ers prior to the season starting, I mentioned that I thought this team was going to be one of the teams to beat out in the East because the team is fairly stacked, and on top of that, the bench has a lot of shooters. Similarly, I thought the Rockets would be one of the teams to beat out in the West. And I say this because if you look at the starting five for both teams, it's pretty stacked because you have a lot of 80 overalls. And for those that may have missed it, the overalls are going to be lower than what you typically see in 2K videos, mainly because I removed all of the intangibles, and that's tied to a lot of things, which is mentioned in the creation video that we had for Logan Wolf, so check that out as well. But ultimately, you'll see that with these folks, you could probably tack on probably 4 to 6 additional overall points, depending on how much the intangible setting is set up. So everybody in this league has an intangible rating of 25 compared to some in 2K. They may have intangibles of 99, 74, yada, yada, yada. So to have folks that are in the low 80s to high 80s is really solid, meaning that Shannon Tarsuski in the normal 2K world, he could probably be a 90 to a 91 overall. Angel would be 89 to a 90, etc. And so if you look at the matchups, you see we have Sean Hornacek, 82 overall, going up against Shannon Tarsuski. So 76ers have the slight edge there. But then Damien Simms has 85 overall compared to Angel Reed, who is at 85 overall. And I have a lot of high expectations because Angel is actually based off of Kobe Bryant. Wallace Vidal, he's at 82 overall compared to Wesley Law, who's at 82 overall. And then we have Eli Harris, who is modeled or created by Hoodie Sean. So the links will be in the description there. But Eli is one of the prime players that Hoodie plays with on his channel and is a staple in the 2K community. He's going up against Ralph Holloway, who's 84, so they're fairly evenly matched. And then the only difference between the two teams, the largest difference actually, is Jalen Shaw, who's a 69 overall, versus Dean Pearson, who's an 81 overall. And so Jalen's in the starting lineup because he is actually the only pure center on the Rockets, which is why he is there. And so the reason I wanted to highlight this game is mainly because the Rockets are 43-31 versus the 76ers, who are 43-32 as of last week. And I thought this would be a good opportunity for us to take a look at these two teams. Now, full disclosure, this game will not be as good as the Rockets versus Hornets game, but still, I wanted to take the opportunity to highlight the game, which led to why I wanted to just talk about the Rockets in more detail so you can get familiar with the players. So with that being said, let's get into it. Jalen Shaw wins the tip-off, and here we go. And so normally I try to show the entire game highlights so you can see who scored which buckets, as long as they were highlights, but that would make this video extremely long. But Wallace Vidal passed the rock to Eli Harris, who shoots the three-pointer, and within a couple of seconds they get on the board with a three-pointer. It looks like Ralph Holloway got lost on some screens, leaving Eli the space he needed to shoot that three-point shot. And so now we are a couple of seconds past that play, and we have Jalen Shaw, who passes the rock to Wallace Vidal, passes it to Eli Harris, guarded by Ralph Holloway, and a big fadeaway shot. Green lights off the backboard, bring the score 5-2. Yeah, it looks like Ralph Holloway is going to have a long night if he keeps this up. So Eli Harris on the break, running up the court, He passes the rock to Sean Hornacek, who gets an easy layup. There was poor transition defense on the side of the 76ers for that play, which is why the score is now 7-2. But Wesley Law has the rock. He's trying to find an opening. It looks like the Rockets are trying to double team him, but Eli's trying to figure out who he wants to guard, which left an opening for Wesley Law. As we see, Damien Simms looked like he dropped his coverage. Wesley Law was open, and so was Ralph Holloway, so Eli chose to guard Ralph. And so now we have Angel Reed, who's bringing up the rock. He gets stripped by Sean Hornacek, who's running on the fast break, pops the alley-oop to Wallace Vidal. Hey! 13-4 is now the score. So within 3 minutes, the score has run up very quickly in the favor of the Rockets. But now we have Eli Harris up against Angel Reed, who's cold within 4 minutes. And hey, reverse layup, green lights, easy buckets for Eli. He sauced that man up. Angel did not know what to do against him. Easy buckets for Eli. So the score is now 18-5 with Eli Harris in the post again. Another fadeaway jumper, but this time it's rim and in the net, no backboard, and Ralph Holloway is looking real soft right now. He can't guard Eli. He's gonna be in for a long night at this point in time. And so the Rockets' chemistry, I will admit, has increased exponentially over the season. The team definitely knows how to coordinate, definitely passes the rock around, and they definitely help each other out. But right here, as you can see, all 3 team members are trying to get the putback, and it just wasn't working. And Abe Garland, hey! With the dunk. Oh, Abe got that in his back. Crossover. Behind the back. Lost Pete Gaines. And a nice dunk at the rack. It's nice to see Abe getting some burn because he was on the DMP list for the majority of the season. So it's good to see the 76ers trying new things. Hey, Reed Rose with an alley-oop from Clarence Booker. Reed Rose is another player who is also on the DMP list for the majority of the season. It's good to see him getting some burn. And so Reed Rose with the rock again. Damien Simms guarding him. Takes an opportunity, got a baby on him, easy layup, bringing the score 32-13. So I didn't know like Reed Rose had this in his bag, but it's good to see him as well getting some play. And I would say in this first quarter, he was getting a lot more buckets than I originally intended, or expected, I should say, since I'm not the coach of the 76ers, but I digress. But Clarence Booker with a dot to Reed in the post, easy layup over Rich Swift. Rich definitely couldn't guard that because I think Reed Rose is like 6 inches taller than him. But fast forward to the end of the first quarter, Harvey Ray with a dot to Frederick Williams at third, bring the score 36-19, and that ends the first quarter. Now, the second quarter is where things get really interesting. So Shannon Tarsusi with Reed Rose off of the spin move and gets the and one off of Rich Swift. Look at that again. Big spin move. Lost Rich Swift with the lay and one. Nice play by Reed Rose. So Angel Reed passes it to Shannon Tarsusi, who gets the half spin but gets stripped by Sean Hornacek. Now on the fast break, I thought they were going to pass to Damien Simms, which he did. Missed it, but Eli with the putback, bringing the score 47-26. Already had 17 points at this point in the game. Eli was straight beasting. And now Shannon passes it to Angel Reed, who's trying to sauce up Damien Simms, but he gets stripped again. Angel is cold. Fast break, easy bucket for Sean Hornacek. Score was then 49-26. They get stripped again, but this time they were able to recover. Roderick Henderson misses the layup. Jalen Shaw passes it to Frederick Williams III, who gets the alley-oop to Eli. Hey, reverse dunk. Okay, Eli, 56-30. Look at that again. See what I was saying about the chemistry? Frederick Williams, who was on the bench, just warming the bench, is now throwing lobs to Eli Harris. Love to see it. Oh, big block by Eli Harris, which ended that play, which I just wanted to highlight. I don't know why I wanted to highlight. It wasn't like he scored or anything. But Sean Hornacek saucing Shannon Tarsusi up, and then Eli with another three-pointer from beyond the arc. I don't know who was it. Oh, Ralph got lost. Clearly got lost. Easy bucket for Eli. Score is now 59-34 with Shannon running up the court. It looks like Shannon was taking this personally, and this is when the battle between him and Sean started to heat up. So as you can see, he lost Sean shooting the three-pointer, gets the buckets, and now we have Dean Pearson, passes the rock to Clarence Booker, and then Shannon Tarsusi again with the layup over Sean Hornacek. It looks like this battle is just heating up, but I love it. Love to see it. So at least Shannon has some fight back. Ooh, but Sean Hornacek with a spin move, layup over Shannon, and now the score is 61-38. He wanted some get back immediately with the spin move. Nice layup, lost Shannon. Love to see it. Next up, we have Reed Rose with the rock, who passes it to Shannon again for 3 over Eli Harris, bringing the score 61-43. And I was actually surprised he was able to get that shot off with Eli right there, because I know Eli could close out very quickly. But nice score for Shannon's sake. But then Sean came back with the rock, lost Shannon, easy layup in the paint, bringing the score 62-43. So yeah, on the perimeter, Shannon's looking real sus right now. At least he can't guard Sean in that regard. But now Damien Simms with the rock, covered by Dean Pearson, passed the ball to Eli Harris, and oh, he caught a body in the paint. Get out that paint, boy. Look at this again. Damien Simms to Eli Harris. Get up there. Hold that. And now fast forward to the end of the second quarter. Harvey Ray with the rock passes the alley-oop to Eli Harris, and oh my goodness, did you see that double clutch reverse dunk? That man Eli is a beast. But as you can see, the game got out of hand. The score is 134-92 after that Rich Swift layup, and I definitely thought the 76ers would have more fight than they actually displayed in this game. Now, looking at the box score, you can see that the Rockets dominated each of the quarters with the exception of the third quarter, which was mainly in part because of the second string from the 76ers. And so, as you can see, Dean Pearson, who's the 5, he had the most points on the team with 20 points, 4 boards, 3 blocks, shooting 8 for 14, followed by Shannon Tarsuski. Like I said, he tried to bring the team back with 13 points, 4 boards, 7 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, but his shooting splits were extremely awful. If he shot better, the team might have been in the game. But then Reed Rose, he was the surprise. He was the sleeper for me. He also had 13 points, 7 boards, 7 assists, shooting 5 for 9. Angel Reed sold, shooting 2 for 12. Clarence Booker also sold, shooting 2 for 19. And then Ralph Holloway, who's not even on the list, he did nothing in this game, and that's the main reason why this team performed as poorly as they did. There was very little movement of the ball. They were taking a lot of poor shots, especially Angel Reed. I expect a lot more from him, but I guess he was just having an off day. And I think there may be some chemistry issues between the teams, but nonetheless, they scored poorly. And now, if we take a look at the Houston Rockets, you can see that Eli Harris had a monster game. In 26 minutes, had 37 points, 11 boards, 2 assists, 1 block, shooting 17 from 30 from the field, 3 for 6 from the three-point line. Sean Hornacek also had a double-double, but in fact, it was closer to a triple-double with 35 points, 8 boards, 10 assists, 4 steals, shooting 15 for 25, although he did miss the 1 three-pointer that he had, but he was flawless from the free throw line. Frederick Williams III, as I said, he went off this game. I was very surprised by him. He had 16 points, 10 boards, 5 assists, shooting 5 for 6. He was very efficient from the field as well as from the free throw line. Wallace Vidal had 11 points, 2 boards, 5 assists, 1 steal, shooting 5 for 8. I think Rich Swift, despite as good as I expect him to be, he sold 2 for 13. If he shot better, this game probably would have been out of reach even further than it was. But then we have some I don't want to say sleepers, because Gilbert Van Horn, he's not a sleeper, but he's definitely not somebody that gets a lot of burn. He was 3 for 3 from the field, which is a good look for him. Odell Hilliard, 2 for 3 with 4 points. Greg Sparks, 4 points, shooting 2 for 2. So in this game, it looks like everybody on the Rockets got a chance to eat, and they had a solid win over what I thought would be a formidable team in the 76ers, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Now, considering I didn't highlight the entire Rockets versus 76ers game, I did want to follow the same format that I did with the Bucks, and that's to show the entire rotation so you know who the players are before we take a deeper dive into what makes them who they are. So starting off at the 1, we have Sean Hornacek, who you should know by now. Damien Simms at the 2, Wallace Vidal at the 3, Eli Harris, or Eli Primetime Harris at the 4, and Jalen Shaw at the 5. And then for the second string, we have Harvey Ray leading the pack at the 6th position. He normally plays the 1, followed by Pete Gaines, who plays the 4 and sometimes the 5. Rich Swift plays the 2. Odell Hilliard plays the 3, and then we have Frederick Williams III, who also plays as the 3, but serves as the 4 sometimes as well. And he had a really monster game this game, which is not the norm. Then we have Greg Sparks, CJ Longley, Gilbert Van Horn, and Julian Anderson. So now with that being said, let's take a deeper dive into these players, starting off with Damien Simms. So Damien Simms is actually modeled after Rajon Rondo. And I think the version that I had of him is going to be the all-time Celtics version of Rajon, and the randomizer had a net positive effect on Damon's offensive attributes, whereas the effects on the athleticism, mental, and potential attributes were downgraded. So as you can see here, he is an overall of 85. From an interior perspective, he's very solid shooting there, and is pretty decent from the mid as well as 3-point, but his defensive skills on the interior is trash, and it's to be expected from the 2 position. But then his perimeter defense is solid, playmaking is solid, his rebounding is poor, as to be expected, but then his physicals as well as his IQ is fairly decent. And so now, if we look at his stats thus far, Damien is having a pretty solid season thus far, although there is room for improvement. So starting off, he's shooting roughly 12 points per game, 4 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals, and his field goal percentage is 48%. His 3-point percentage leaves a lot to be desired, roughly at 34%, and his free throws is pretty atrocious, where he's shooting at 58% for the year. So although he is the highest overall, I do think that Damien has, I don't want to say potential. Potential is not the right word, but he could definitely be doing more for the team. Next up, we have Rich Swift, and he is based off of Dan Marley from the All-Time Suns, and the randomizer definitely wasn't helpful as relates to Rich's development. So first and foremost, it was negative towards his offense, athleticism, as well as his potential attributes, and it was mainly neutral towards his mental attribute. And so looking at his skill sets, you'll see that from the interior, he's a B+. Considering that he's a shooting guard and he can't shoot from the mid-range, is kind of horrible, to say the least. And we've seen that in the games, or at least I've seen that in a lot of the games that I've seen Rich in. From the 3-point line, he should be deadly, but oftentimes he bricks a lot. And I don't know if it's because of where he's shooting from. It might be a cold spot, or maybe it's tied to his jump shot, or maybe the timing, or the defender that's closing out on him. I don't know what it is, but I often find that he misses his 3 points, then makes them. Interior defense is average. Perimeter defense is pretty solid. Playmaking, decent. Rebounding, terrible. His physicals, okay. But his IQ is there. It's just that when it comes to shooting, he takes a lot of poor shots, unfortunately for him. Now, considering Rich's capabilities as a player, as we just saw, I would expect a lot more from him. So as you can see from the stats here on the screen, he doesn't really contribute to the team as much as one would expect him to. So from a point perspective, he's only shooting 6 points per game, gets 2 boards, roughly 3 assists, and that's about it. From the field goal percentage, he's shooting 41% from the field, 40% from 3, and then almost 79% from the free throw line. But I think the team would definitely benefit more if Rich got more involved and took better shots from what I saw. But ultimately, it's not as great as one would expect it to be. Next up, we have Eli Primetime Harris. He actually jumped up 2 overall since the beginning of the season, despite the big injury that he had earlier in the season, which was during the time that the Rockets went on, I think it was like an 11-game losing streak. And now, since he got back, since Damien got back, since Sean Hornacek got back, they've been on a tear. So I don't want to go into too much detail from a development perspective when it comes to Eli, because as I mentioned before, Eli is created by Hoodie Sean. So I highly recommend you check out Hoodie Sean's channel. Eli is a staple there, and anything you need to know about Eli can be found there. But if we're talking about Eli from a points perspective and a stats perspective, you can see that Eli is like that, shooting 22 points per game, almost 13 rebounds per game, 5 assists per game, almost 2 blocks per game, shooting 46% from the field, 43% from beyond the arc, 73% at the free throw line. Now that could be improved upon, but this is why I was saying that I think Eli Harris is the leader of the team. Now, he may not be the highest overall on the team. As you can see, he has Rich Swift and Damien Simms above him. When it comes to overall impact on the team, scoring perspective, and driving things forward, Eli is the guy. Now, next up, we have Sean Hornacek, and Sean was based off of Freddie Lewis from the All-Time Pacers, and the output for the randomizer was a bit of a mixed bag with some offensive improvements as well as some declines towards his offensive attributes. Then some of the defensive attributes were improved, as well as the athleticism, and then the potential, which actually declined. So it was a bit of a mixed bag for Sean, but as you can see on the screen, he's fairly decent when it comes to scoring. His defense, interior defense is a bit suspect, but his perimeter defense is solid. His playmaking is even better, which we saw in the game. Rebounding isn't there, and the team definitely doesn't need him to be an intense rebounder, but his physicals as well as his IQ is pretty solid as well. And so Sean himself, he actually went down, at least I think. I need to double check on that, but I thought he was at 83 overall when the season started, or maybe just my notes were incorrect. But right now he's at 82, and he does his thing from what we saw. He's definitely a solid playmaker. He gave Shannon Tarsuski a run for the money, and I definitely am pleased with what I've seen from Sean. And in fact, the FBL logo is Sean shooting a 3-point shot. Fun fact. Now, if we take a look at his splits for the season thus far, Sean, like Eli, is on the verge of averaging a double-double. In fact, he's getting close to averaging a triple-double with 20 points per game, 9 rebounds, 7 assists, and 2 steals. From the field, he's shooting roughly 43%, from beyond the arc 42%, and from the free throw line almost 88%. So Sean is the absolute dog, and between him and Eli, they make a solid duo. But I do think overall as a team, they come to ball and they have the ability to do so. So next up, we have Wallace Fadal, and Wallace, he is modeled after Mike Bibby from the 01-02 Kings, and the randomizer was marginally positive for his offensive attributes, but solidly positive towards his defensive attributes. But the randomizer was also negative towards his athleticism as well as his potential. And so what you can see on the screen is that from the interior, he's solid. From the mid-range, he's deadly. From beyond the arc, he's solid as well. So for a stretch 3, stretch 4 in this case, well, is it really a stretch 3? I'm probably talking out my rear end at this point. But as you can see, he's a scoring machine. And so from a shooting capability, Wallace is nasty. Interior defense, ain't it? He can't do that at all. Perimeter defense, so-so. He has room for improvement. His playmaking is definitely there. I've seen him catch a couple of oops and dish a couple of passes in the pocket to the right folks. Boarding, definitely not there. But his physicals, B-. His IQ is a C-. Overall, I think Wallace is solid for what he contributes to the team. As you can see, he's at 82 overall, and I think he jumped up actually 1 slot from the beginning of the season. But if we take a look at his stats, Wallace is solid overall, and I completely forgot this is his rookie year. So kudos to him. As you can see, he's averaging 50 points per game, almost 3 rebounds, almost 4 assists, 1 steal per game, and almost 1 block per game, shooting roughly 53% from the field overall, 37% from beyond the arc, and 85% from the free throw line. So I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for Wallace, because I thought he was much older than what he is. And so consider that this is his first year in the league. Things might get very interesting for Wallace in the future. But next up, we have Harvey Ray. Now, Harvey is based off of Draymond Green from the All-Time Warriors, which I completely forgot about. The randomizer downgraded his offense attributes, upgraded his athleticism, and downgraded his potential. But overall, from what I've seen in-game and from a stat perspective, Harvey is a beast. And that's mainly based off of the fact that he's based off of Draymond Green. So naturally, that would be the case. So he's 34, 81 overall. As you can see from his interior perspective, that shooting is great. He actually jumped up 1 overall slot since the beginning of the season. His mid-range is terrible. His 3-point shot is there, although he doesn't take many of those shots. His inside defense is solid, but at 6'3", he'll never beat on the interior. But he definitely clamps people up on the perimeter as well. And if they do get by him, he does find a way to get in front of them, because I know he's clamped up Miles many times. And actually, the intro video that we had for the series, he was actually facing Miles on a one-on-one game. But from a playmaking perspective, he's solid there. Rebounding, he definitely gets his boards despite being 6'3". Physicals solid, as well as his IQ very solid. So I completely whiffed on that. I didn't realize that he was based off of Draymond Green, which is why he is the sixth man of the year candidate at this point in time. And as you can see, he's a 3-point facilitator with 38 badges overall. So now when we look at the stats, Harvey is having a solid year overall, which explains why he's at the top of the list for the sixth man of the year. So as you can see right now, his averages are 13 points per game, almost 10 rebounds, 6 assists, 1 steal, 1 block, shooting 45% from the field, almost 41% from beyond the arc, and 64.3% at the free throw line. So if anything, he needs to work on his free throw shot, but overall, he is beasting, which is why he is where he is. Now, is there room for him to do more? Absolutely, but I've been overall pleased with what Harvey has done. Now, next up, we have Pete Gaines, who jumped the most out of everybody thus far during the season. He started off with a 71 overall, and as you can see on the screen, he is now a 75. And so I think that's probably tied to the fact that when Eli got injured, Pete actually stepped in to help out and cover that position. In some cases, I think he filled in at the 5 slot. But overall, I didn't even realize Pete was that old. I thought he was much younger, but I digress. First and foremost, Pete is based off of a 2K base. The randomizer had a positive effect on his offense, athleticism, and potential attributes, but it did have a negative effect on his defense attributes. So as you can see here, from a shooting perspective, he's pretty solid from the interior, pretty solid from the 3-point line, but where he should be getting his buckets is at the mid-range. His interior defense is average, his perimeter defense is sus. Playmaking is okay, below average, rebounding terrible for his position. He's pretty weak at his size, and then his IQ is okay, but like I said before, he progressed from a 71 overall to a 75 overall and is considered a mid-range specialist. Now, when we look at Pete's stats for the season thus far, considering that he's 7th in the rotation, I think his stat line is pretty decent. 12 points per game, 2 boards, almost 2 assists, almost a steal, almost a block, shooting 47% from the field, 34% from beyond the arc, but his free throws is atrocious, shooting 46% from the free throw line. I think if he has a couple more years in the league, we probably see him get up to a 78, 79, which would be like an 82, 83 in normal 2K terms. But overall, I think Pete contributes a lot more than, let's say, a Rich Swift, who's a higher overall. And so I've definitely been pleased. But next up, we have Frederick Williams III, who absolutely went off against the 76ers. Now, Frederick is the 10th man in the rotation. I'm actually going to contradict myself because I just said that Pete Gaines had the highest change in overall compared to everybody else in the team, but in all actuality, Frederick was a 69 at the beginning of the season, and so I was very shocked to see him getting so much play time during the game that we just watched with the 76ers, and that's because he himself jumped up 4 overalls to earn his spot in the rotation. But nonetheless, from a randomizer perspective, he was actually based off of a 2K base. The changes were to his shooting, his interior scoring, as well as his potential, in that they were improved, but then there were some aspects of his interior scoring that were downgraded, so to speak. His blocking was downgraded, as well as some of his playmaking, specifically pass perception, or I guess we could call that defense or maybe mentals. That was actually downgraded as well. But he was actually part of the draft class that I had in my other session of my league, and he was actually the 44th pick overall. And so I'm happy to see him progress as much as he did, all things considered. But as you can see on the screen, and just as I said, his interior scoring is decent. It's not terrible. Mid-range could use some work. 3-point, he's stellar. I don't recall seeing him take a lot of 3-point shots, but if he did, he probably could make them. But from a defensive perspective and playmaking perspective, he needs a lot of work, especially considering the position that he's at. His rebounding is decent. And then, as we saw, his physicals as well as his IQ is so-so. And so from a scoring perspective, although he went off against the 76ers, shooting 5 points per game, almost 4 rebounds, a little under 1 assist, a little under 1 block, but from field, he's shooting 39%, almost 40%, 51% or 52% from beyond the arc, and that may be tied to volume since his points are so low. And then his free throw percentage is 71%. So Frederick, as I said, he's a rookie. He still has a lot to go, but ultimately, I think if he stays in the league long, he may get up to like a 78, maybe a 79, depending on how his potential goes. But next up, we have Odell Hilliard, who is based off of Damien Jones from the 20 to 21 Suns. And the randomizer had a net negative effect towards his offensive attributes. However, it was positive towards his athleticism, mental, as well as potential attributes. And so I do think Odell might be better suited for another position, but I'm leaving it up to the coach or the CPU, whatever we want to call it, to make that determination. But just like the other characters on this team, he jumped up 4 overalls as well, from a 69 to a 73. And fun fact, Odell is actually the cousin of Derek Hilliard, who's on the Brooklyn Nets. But in any event, I digress. So you can see from his grades, he's very solid from the interior and mid-range from a shooting perspective. 3-point, he's below average. His defense on the interior is really solid. His perimeter defense is poor. Playmaking is poor. Rebounding is average, a little bit above average, I should say. Physically, he's strong. And then his IQ is a little under average. So I think Odell has progressed into becoming a role player. I do think, considering his age, he still has room to grow, like Frederick Williams, like Pete Gaines. He may be able to get up to a 78, 79 overall, which could be an 80 to 82 compared to normal 2K terms. But now let's take a look at the stats, since I'm rambling a little bit about Odell. And so from a point perspective, you see he's averaging 4 points per game, almost 3 boards, and almost a block per game, but his field goal percentage is roughly 58% from the field. He doesn't shoot any threes, although his grades would deem otherwise, and then his free throws are god awful. And so I would think that percentage from the percentage from the field goal, which is almost 58%, I think that's also tied to what I was saying about Frederick, and that he probably doesn't take a lot of shots, and when he does, he makes them. So that's why that is as high as it is. And so next up, we have CJ Longley, who is based off of a 2K base, and the randomizer upgraded his offense as well as his potential attributes, but downgraded his defense and athleticism attributes. So I do think, just like Odell, CJ may be better suited for another role, but as with Odell, I'm leaving that up to the coach. And so, fun fact, as you can see, he is kind of upset because you can see his overall is down from a 71 to a 70, but he was actually starting off this season with a 68 overall. So he did progress 3 overalls, but because he's not getting as much playtime as he would like, he's currently unhappy with the game plan for the team. But from an interior scoring perspective, he's really solid. Mid-range, he's above average, and he could even shoot from beyond the arc. But his interior defense, his perimeter defense are trash. He has some playmaking ability. His rebounding is poor. His physicals are average as well as an average IQ. And so considering he's 6'8", that's why I was saying he might be better suited for maybe the 3, or in some cases, maybe even the 2. He'd be really tall two guard. But that's why I think like CJ may be better suited for another position. Now, if we take a look at his stats for the season, I don't expect much, but from what we see on the screen, he's really not getting any burn. So almost 3 points per game, and that's about it. His field goal percentage is 57% from the field, almost 33% from the 3-point line, and 75% from the free throw line. But other than that, considering the low number of points, I would say either he doesn't get a lot of play, or he doesn't take a lot of shots, or it's a mixture of both. And so that's probably why CJ is upset. And I do have a hinkling in that, considering that he plays the 5 and we have Jalen Shaw at the 5 starting off, that might be tied to why he's upset. But I'll table that for now, and let's talk about Greg Sparks. So Greg is actually modeled after Monty Sparks from the 97 to 98 Spurs. I didn't realize that until now. But the randomizer effect improved 2 out of the 3 offensive attributes that were selected and decreased his athleticism, mental, and potential attributes. And so, as you can see, he also plays the 4 and the 5. I do see him getting more burn than I see CJ getting burn, and that's mainly tied to the fact that he's able, actually no, he's not able to get rebounds. His physicals are actually worse. His IQ is worse. Scoring interior on the interior is worse. And so I actually don't know why Greg is actually Actually, I do know why, because he's actually taller than CJ Longley at 7 foot compared to CJ 6'8". So that might be why. But overall, Greg has 20 badges. He's a 70 overall. He actually didn't progress at all over the season thus far. And so rather than placing CJ in another position that might be better suited to his skills, CJ is actually the 3rd string, and Greg and Jalen Shaw are bumped up above him at the 5 position. So that's pretty tough for CJ. But nonetheless, let's get into Greg's stats for the season thus far. And so Greg's stats are fairly in line with CJ's, with some minor improvements, so to speak. So from point perspective, he's shooting 4 points per game. He gets almost 2 boards a game, 2 assists, and almost that's actually a turnover per game, so that's not really good. But from a fielding perspective, he's shooting 44% from the field, almost 43% from beyond the arc, and almost 70% from the free throw line. So his shooting splits are a lot better, but from a volume perspective, they're fairly in line, in that he probably doesn't take a lot of shots, which is why his percentages are as good as they are. And then so next up, considering the line of thought that I had over CJ Longley as well as Greg Sparks, we have Jalen Shaw, who you can see is a 69 overall. And considering the rule that I placed before, in that if you were under a 70 overall, I would not speak to the player, but considering that Jalen is actually one of the starters for the team, despite him being a 69 overall, I figure I'd talk about him. So to start off, Jalen was a 68 overall, and he jumped up 1 overall over the course of the season thus far. And the randomizer had an effect that was negative towards his offensive attributes as well as his athleticism attributes. But then the randomizer had a positive impact on his potential attribute. But as I was saying before, with the other 2, I think Jalen himself might be better suited for another position. I'm thinking like a 3-4 combo, but as is the case with the other 2, leaving it entirely to the CPO to do that. So I'm debating if I should change a lot of these players to the positions that might be better suited towards their skills, but at the same time, not everybody's going to be good in the league, just as not everybody's going to be great in real life in the NBA, depending on their skill sets. They may want to play a certain position, like AD doesn't want to play the 5 position. He prefers to play the 4, even though the Lakers could use him at the 5. But you get the idea here. So I'm really going back and forth as far as whether or not I should look at each player within the league and change their position to a position that's better suited to their skill sets. But at the same time, part of me is thinking like, no, I want this to be a natural progression for a lot of these folks. But besides that large monologue that I just had, let's take a look at the stats that Jalen has for the season thus far before we get into the team stats. And so looking at his stats thus far for the season, Jalen's averaging 8 points per game, 4 boards, 3 assists, 1 steal, and almost a block per game, which is pretty decent considering he's a 69 overall. And he's kind of small for his position. He's the same height as CJ Longley, but from a fielding perspective, he's shooting roughly 36% from the field, which that would be up considering he's on the interior. His 3-point percentage is terrible, and his free throw shooting is a bit average, but he could definitely do better than what he's showing right now. So overall, I think Jalen, it's interchangeable, right, between him, CJ, and Greg Shaw, but it is what it is. He's the one that's getting the most love right now, so that's what it's going to be. And so for the rest of the Rockets, we have Gilbert Van Horn, as I mentioned, who's a 69 overall, Julian Anderson, who's a 66 overall, and Earl Lewis, who is now in the G League at a 62 overall. So now, when we're looking at the player stats, you can see why I say Eli is the leader of this team. So not only is he almost averaging a double-double, but he's also leading the team in points. And so followed by Sean Hornacek, who's shooting roughly 20 points per game, Wallace Fidal with the 15 points, Damien Simms with almost 13, and Harvey Ray with almost 13 points as well. So as I mentioned before, I think this team is pretty solid all around from the offensive as well as the defensive perspective. And so if you want to rank things by rebounds, naturally Eli is the highest, followed by Harvey Ray, who's almost getting 10 boards per game. And Sean Hornacek, who's the one guard, almost has 9 boards, but he could easily get that up to 10 if he gets a few more boards. And then after that, you see there's a big drop between the rebounding, where Damien Simms has an average of 4 boards per game, and that's followed by Jalen Shaw, who's at the 5 position with 4 boards per game as well. From an assist perspective, they're more closely in line, where Damien Simms is leading with almost 8 assists per game. Sean Hornacek is almost at 8 as well. Harvey Ray, 6. And then Eli Harris with roughly 5 assists per game. And then there's a slight drop to Wallace Fidal, who's almost at 4 assists per game. And then when we look at the steals, I can say that Damien has that on lock with 2 steals per game, followed by Sean Hornacek, Harvey Ray, Wallace Fidal, and Jalen Shaw. And then when we look at the blocks per game, that is being led by Eli Harris, who is almost averaging 2 blocks per game, followed by Harvey Ray, who's at 1.2. And then there's a slight drop where we have Odell Hilliard, Jalen Shaw, as well as Wallace Fidal, almost averaging close to a block per game. So now looking at an efficiency perspective, the best person with the highest field goal percentage is Earl Lewis, and we're going to discount that because he's only taken 1 field goal and made that 1 field goal, which is why his percentage is so high. But if we sort this by field goals attempted, you can see Eli has a really solid field goal percentage of 46%, followed by Sean Hornacek, who has 43%, but I think Wallace Fidal has the best out of everybody at 52% for shooting 11 for taking 11 shots and almost making 6 of those. And then if we look at the 3-point percentage, we have the same case with Julian Anderson as we did with Earl. So we're going to discount that and look at the attempted shots, where Sean Hornacek takes the most, but he's averaging roughly 42%. Eli Harris, I would say he's the next highest from an attempt perspective, but his efficiency is a lot better than Sean at 44%. Harvey Ray has a good clip, and then Wallace, he has 37%, but for his position, that's pretty decent. And so as I wrap up this video, you can see, although the Rockets started off pretty poorly throughout the season when Eli was out with an injury, same thing with Sean Hornacek and Damien Simms, the Rockets at this point in time during week 26, they are currently at the 3 seed, followed by my Dallas Mavericks, and right above them are the Warriors and the Lakers. So I would say it's pretty sure that either the Warriors or the Lakers are going to be the 1 and 2 seed, and so it's really a battle between the Rockets and the Mavericks, and really the Timberwolves as well as the Spurs, because it could be any one of these teams that make it to the 3, 4, and the 5 slot for this conference. So it's a really tight race for the playoffs, but at the very least, the Rockets and the Mavericks have clinched their playoff berth compared to the Timberwolves and the Spurs. And so I do know that this is probably a long video, considering the fact that I recorded a lot for the video. But if you want to see another team, considering we're getting close to the end of the regular season, leave a comment below letting me know which team you want me to highlight next. But I do want to get back into some gameplay, considering we have 2 weeks left in the regular season, and then we have the playoffs, and so I want to be able to cover that stuff as well, because I'm sure you want to actually see some of the teams and some of the gameplay as well. But nonetheless, as always, I enjoy making these vids, especially this one because I forgot a lot about these players. So I hope you enjoy these vids as well. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. and also leave some comments. I want to hear from you. Let me know what you like about these videos, what you would like to see, so that we can make this more interesting, because I want you to enjoy this as much as I do. But nonetheless, until next time, I hope you have a good one. Later.